Ever since I got back from Japan a few weeks ago, I've been kind of obsessed with soft vinyl toys, I guess you'd say. I saw quite a few of them when I was over there at various stores, and I don't know, something just clicked for me, and I really started being interested in this genre of toy. I had a few of them in the past, sort of slowly, very, very slowly collecting them, but I really have gotten a little borderline obsessed with them recently. And so I wanted to make a video about it, just kind of share it with you guys. I think a lot of Americans in particular probably are not fully aware of Sofubi or Sofubi toys, these soft vinyl toys, and it might be interesting to learn about. On the left here, we have what I would consider to be sort of a typical, traditional soft vinyl toy. This is a Ladon toy, or in English we say Rodan, from Godzilla. This is actually a reproduction from the 90s of a 1960s toy, as I understand it, but you can see it's got a very simple sculpt. It's got simple paint, just some airbrushed metallic colors over the raw color of the vinyl that it's made of, and it's very light. It's also hollow, so you can kind of squeeze it and deform it, but this is the traditional, I guess you'd say, vinyl toy. But you can also get what we call indies Sofubi in Japan, independent creators making soft vinyl toys, kind of in very small batches usually, hand done for the most part, not really what you would think of as a factory-made kind of item. And that's what we have here on the right as an example of that. So this one is called the One-Horned Insect Emperor Gaorg, and I was really intrigued by this sculpt. As you can see, it's a rhinoceros beetle, which are a common pet in Japan for boys to have, but you can even buy them in Toys R Us sometimes. But they, turned it into this really cool-looking, Aztec-inspired, I would guess, design. So he's got all kinds of engravings here in his armor, these faces, and even on the back of his wings here. Really cool paint job. This is a one-off paint job, so this is not something that they mass-produced. It's just a custom paint job by a certain artist, I guess, but they did make some of these that were mass-produced in different color schemes. One interesting thing, first of all, he's quite large, and he's got a fair amount of articulation for a Sofubi figure. He's even got this additional weapon that's a separate piece. In fact, it's two separate pieces. You can move this part a little bit. Very cool paint, though. I really like the blue accents on this in particular. Really, really nice. And you can see this is actually his head reproduced on the handle there, which I thought was cool. And this is like his wings and everything. So it's like a little miniature version of his body on here, which is pretty cool. These have, as I say, a fair amount of articulation because he's got up and down here. He's got turning at basically at the wrist, I guess. Sofubi figures tend not to have a huge amount of articulation, but they have about as much as you'd really want, I think, usually. Although I will give you an example of one that has relatively limited articulation in a minute. I also really like his face here. Just look at that. This is an example of that kind of independent soft vinyl toy, and this is the kind that I am most interested in. I think there's some amazing stuff going on with people, artists, making their own creations like this, and so that's, more so than this kind is, this is what I've been interested in and what I've been collecting. Part of that is, I don't have the feelings of nostalgia for this kind of toy that maybe Japanese people would, because I didn't grow up watching Godzilla or Ultraman or anything like that. But the other thing is, these are super expensive now. Even this reproduction one is kind of expensive, but the originals from the 60s are just in the stratosphere in terms of price. So it's not a good time to be starting to collect those, even though I mean, I could totally see myself doing that theoretically. I do find them very charming in the way that they're sculpted and made, but I probably won't be doing that. But these guys over here, while they're also kind of expensive in many cases, are a little bit more obtainable. They're kind of limited, hard to get in some cases. If you want to buy them, you often have to enter what's called a lottery. Winning means that you're given the chance to buy the figure. You don't actually win the figure. Anyway, I just wanted to maybe introduce some of these soft vinyl figures that I've picked up recently to you, and maybe talk a little bit about this whole genre of collecting. I also want to introduce briefly a store that I visited in Tokyo that specializes in soft vinyl figures. So let's go ahead and do that.
So before we look at some of the individual things that I've been collecting, I thought I would introduce you to Mandarake Koku, which is a store in Akihabara, Japan, which you see right here, that is specializing only in Sofubi figures, only soft vinyl figures, which I think is pretty interesting that they can have a store that just specializes in that type of figure. Right here you can see it's actually quite a large store. They've got lots of glass cases that are facing the outer walkway where people can pass by and kind of look at stuff. And then there's also a couple of rows of cases inside. And they've got an impressive selection of soft vinyl figures, everything from vintage ones from the 60s, 70s, and 80s to modern reproductions of those figures to so-called indies figures. And, you could spend, if you're interested in this kind of thing, quite a long time just looking at all of the things that they have on offer. I didn't spend a huge amount of time looking at them, but they have a lot of wrestling figures, kind of vintage characters like Tiger Mask and so forth. They have Ultraman and Magnet Man and Rainbow Man and all kinds of sort of 60s Japanese TV heroes. This is a character called Buska, and they also have Kanegon there at the bottom, which I believe is a Ultraman monster. A lot of these I am not really familiar with, so I can't really say much about them, but they're interesting to take a look at. It's kind of a whole other world to what I'm familiar with. What I was a little bit more interested in was the kaiju selection that they had. Kaiju, of course, are monsters from Godzilla or Ultraman or other shows, and that is actually the bulk of what a lot of Sofubi figures are. That kind of kaiju. We have Godzilla here, Mechagodzilla, other characters, and so forth. I am not really that familiar with this kind of movie. I have not grown up watching Godzilla movies, for example. But after seeing so many of them here and elsewhere in Japan, I was actually pretty fascinated by them, and I started watching the movies and shows to try and catch up because I feel like I've been missing out. So I did, in fact, pick up a couple of traditional kaiju-style Sofubi figures, which I'll show you. But where my interests really lie are the indies figures, so-called. These are ones created by generally individual artists, and they can be extremely varied in their subject matter. Some of them are traditional, kaiju, new kaiju figures. Some of them are kind of grotesque. Some of them are cute. This kind of indies Sofubi figure has really exploded in popularity, I think, in the last maybe 10 or 15 years outside of Japan as well as inside. And no matter what kind of thing you like, there's probably something for you. Although if you like monsters, you're in luck because there's a lot of monsters. I will say that these can be very pricey. This Cookie Monster style Godzilla is around $600 some. This Savage King here is close to $1,000. I would say that these are the exceptions rather than the rule, but still, these kind of figures do tend to be on the pricey side, probably, especially compared to what the average person might guess that they cost if you just sort of showed it to them. And part of that is just that these are made in very limited amounts. Oftentimes you have to enter a so-called lottery just to get the right to buy one. You have to be chosen at random and then you can finally buy it, kind of thing. And if you're buying it from a store like this, that means you're buying it on the secondary market usually, and so they're often considerably more pricey than if you had bought them directly from the creator.
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really collecting traditional kaiju style Sofubi toys, but when I saw this, I was really just kind of smitten with it. It's just so kind of derpy looking in some ways, but I really liked it. This is a reproduction of the original 1960s Godzilla soft vinyl toy, although this one has been scaled down. I believe the original one is a couple inches taller, but it wasn't super expensive or anything. And I thought it would be kind of a fun souvenir. This was back before I started buying other ones. I was like, oh, I'll just make it this one, right? Yeah, that worked out real well. But anyway, there's something about this design that I find really charming. He's got kind of an innocent, childlike design, in the same sense that, vintage Star Wars figures have kind of a childlike, simplified design to them, I guess, in a way. This is kind of gives me the same feeling. And in addition to this, I also picked up a Gamera or Gamera toy. This is, if you're not familiar with Gamera, he is essentially the turtle version of Godzilla. It was a competing monster. Still, they still make movies, or at least relatively recently, they've been making movies for him as well. And I just thought this was quite the toy. Gamera and Godzilla, by the way, started out basically just as monsters, kind of bad guys, and then fairly quickly transformed into basically, if not heroes, at least essentially benevolent creatures. Like Gamera in particular, they went all the way the other direction and made him kind of a campy figure. He's literally a protector of children and stuff like that. So pretty fun just to pick up a few of these, but I don't really plan to have a big collection of them. This one is something that really attracted my attention when I saw it on store shelves, and I saw it along with several of the other creations from this creator known as Mirac Toy, and I was just really fascinated by them. They have an unusual style to them. This is, as you may be able to tell, an Egyptian-inspired design. They've got the alligator or crocodile head on kind of I don't know if this is meant to be a mech or if it's like a suit of armor type thing, but in any case, yeah, probably more of a suit of armor, but he's got this very interesting Egypt-inspired design to him. In fact, if we look more closely, and of course there's this headdress that's been painted so that it almost looks like it's a color-shifting paint, but it's actually just multiple colors that they've laid down. They've got, kind of these Egyptian-themed designs here. They've got the Eye of Horus, I guess that's what this is. Just, if you look at this, there's a scarab here on his hip. I don't know if we can see that. This has very limited articulation. That's what I was talking about earlier. He can't move his arms up or down, which is unusual for this kind of toy. He basically can just sort of pivot them at the shoulder, and the same goes for the legs here. You can pivot them from side to side, but you can't move them up and down, which is kind of unusual. But anyway, I just really thought the paint job on this was very, very well done. There's another eye. This is cast or made in red vinyl, and then so everything else aside from the red that you see is paint. But I like the way they've made use of the red all throughout here, like on the head and so forth. It's really, really cool looking. Now this designer, Mirac Toy, seems to like to combine very different elements together. So I think this is the only real one he's done with Egypt, but he's done quite a few with sort of Buddhist or Japanese sculpture that is combined with robots or with, mech type things. And in fact, I have a couple that I wanted to show you in addition that I've gotten since I've picked this one up. He's honestly become maybe my favorite creator. So the next one from Mirac Toy is this one right here. It's part of the Dr. Mirac's Powerful Robot series. And this one in particular is called Doping Massive Attack, which may not make a lot of sense to you, except that there was a previous figure in the series just called Massive Attack, and this one is bigger and kind of just, generally speaking, more over the top, I guess. And so this is the the version that's on steroids, essentially. This is a custom painted version that was painted by Video Vomit here in the U.S. It's a guy who does custom painting. I didn't have him custom paint it. He was just sort of selling it on his website, and I found it. And I had seen these ones in this particular toy in Japan in different paint jobs, and I thought this was actually a really good version of it, and wasn't as expensive as it would be in Japan either. So it was nice to be able to find this. This, if you look at the details, it's just incredible. The sculpt, he's got kind of an outer face and then an inner face that's more robotic looking. I don't know if you can tell. And then an inner face that is kind of demonic looking. And in fact, if we turn the head around, you can see there's also a face here that's kind of demonic. I thought that's pretty cool. And there's even like a horn breaking through, like, I don't know. You can interpret these in various ways. I kind of like coming up with my own backstory for how this kind of robot might have been created. But anyway, this sculpt, and this is typical of a lot of his sculpts, just a lot of detail everywhere you look. Even right there, very interesting gun placement. This means like extra, or I think it's referring to the extra large nature of this one compared to the previous one. But I mean, just look at this weapon he's got here on his arm. It's incredible, kind of like a dragon. I really, really like this sculpt. Anyway, the thing that I think appealed to me most about Mirac Toy is this kind of thing where he's combining traditional Buddhist or Asian sculpture elements with just, straight up robots or mechs. There's one more of these that I wanted to show you of his that kind of even goes further in that direction in some sense, and that is this right here. This is part of the Buddha Troopers Surrenders 5, is how you might translate the Japanese, or Buddha Squad. And this is called the Shakati figure. Shakati, I guess, I'm not entirely sure what the actual name for the statues that inspired this is, but, clearly a Buddhist-inspired design. One thing, as I mentioned, these came in various color schemes. This particular one is actually not painted at all. This is just a marble effect vinyl that they've created, and this one, this particular one was sold at a kind of a exhibition at a store in Tokyo for a couple of weeks. That's how limited these are. In fact, if we look at the bottom of his or her foot, it says 5 of 10, so they made 10 of these for that exhibition, and that's it. They can be hard to find and expensive to get, unfortunately. Not a lot of, I don't want to say there's not a lot of articulation, but there's not a lot of usable articulation really on this. You can move the arms, but because it's pointing, it looks a little strange to have one of the arms down like that. So you pretty much are stuck with this pose, but that's all right. And the legs do move to some degree, but they're not able to move that far. But yeah, I just found this sculpt to be really beautiful. It's very impressive, and this marble effect is incredible too. No paint, it just sort of naturally forms highlights on the figure, which I think is really, really cool. I mentioned Gamera earlier, the turtle version of Godzilla, and I think this figure is kind of inspired by that in some sense. It is the Garumega figure from Shikaruna Kobo. All right, they spell it in a way that makes me think you would say Sikaluna or something in English, but in Japanese it's Shikaruna. And I was really impressed with this. Like, it's a cool, nice, size, cool sculpt, and it's been painted to resemble kind of antique wood, I think, and it's a really cool effect. Looks looks really cool. Actually, probably better than it would if it had been painted in a more realistic style. He doesn't have a lot of articulation. You know, that's a typical thing with these, but he does have the ability to move his flippers up like that, and his legs can move, although you're basically stuck just using them to help him stand upright, you know. And then, of course, his head can move a little bit, but this, I don't know, on mine it's very limited. I don't know, I'm not really going to force it. But look at that face. Pretty cool. And a lot of people have pointed out that the shell on the back resembles kind of a Buddhist garden where you have the stones and then raked sand around it. I don't know if that was intentional or what, but it looks really cool. So yeah. These next items are things that I got since coming back from Japan. I actually ordered them online from Japan, had them sent over. That is possible to do sometimes if you are kind of monitoring a creator's social media, and you'll see when they're releasing something. Like for this one in particular, a lot of the more popular things sold out within a few hours, so you do have to be kind of on the spot there. But anyway, this is made by Mokoyama, and the interesting thing about what he does is, first of all, the figures themselves are smaller than the larger ones I've been showing you, and they're also cheaper. But I think the really cool thing about them, aside from their very unique sculpts, is that you can mix and match the pieces. He sells the pieces individually, so you've got, on this one, for example, a headpiece, a body, and then a set of arms, and you could combine any number of about, I don't know, 15 sets in different combinations to make your own figures, essentially. This particular one, the reason I went with this is that I wanted something in this meat marble color, so-called. This is not a painted piece at all, it's just the color of the vinyl that they managed to make in this effect, similar to the one that I showed you earlier with the Buddhist sculpture. And I think it looks really amazing. It really does look like meat. But as I said, these sold out, all the parts in this color sold out really quickly, so I was able to cobble one together using this this combination here, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. And this one here, as I said, they were sold out of the meat marble already, so I couldn't get that. And because this reminded me, especially this Baphomet head, reminded me of Slanesh from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which I used to play. Kind of a demon. And they often use kind of pastel purples and pinks. So I just thought, well, maybe eventually I will paint this, but for now, making it purple seems to be appropriate. And I went with these tentacle arms and stuff. It just made it really crazy, kind of chaotic looking. I really like these, and I do plan to get more of them in the future. I really like the idea of mixing and matching the different pieces and so forth. So definitely will be watching his releases from now on. Next up we have Kaiju Aizone, which is from Max Toy, which is actually an American company that sort of does business with Japan as well. It's made in Japan, but it's owned by a Japanese-American guy, Mark Nagata. And they produce all kinds of soft vinyl figures. Actually, pretty good choice if you're interested in getting something kind of locally in the US that's similar in style to these figures I've been showing you. This one, as I said, I got in Japan. It was, I guess, a collaboration with a Japanese painter, but they made it in this kind of interesting bluish, purplish, color shifting paint. I don't know if you can fully appreciate it in the camera. It looks a little bit uniformly purple in the camera, but in real life, as I'm looking at it, it's actually more of a blue. But it changes depending on how the light hits it. There it looks more blue, as you can probably see. I thought this was really cool. He's supposed to be, I guess, a mutant potato that has grown a bunch of eyes and stalks and things like that. It's just kind of fun. He's got the usual kind of articulation, but you can make him sit down, I believe. Here, let me move this out of the way. You can have him sort of sit down like a toddler or something there, kind of funny. I also got, in addition to this, one other item from Max Toy, which was being sold as a collaboration with one of the stores in Nakano Broadway, which I mentioned in my previous video about shopping in Japan. This is Kaiju Tripus, which is basically instead of an octopus, he's a tripus, right? He's got 3 tentacles at the bottom there. This one, this design has been around for quite a number of years, actually, but this is a new version called a retro color version, and kind of is meant to remind people of those retro style soft vinyl toys, not like this one here, where it's a little bit more of a simple paint job in some sense, but also very bright colors. I like this one because, well, he reminds me of Cthulhu, I guess. I like octopus and squid inspired monsters. One thing that's a little strange, he's got this giant eyeball on the back of his head, and I don't really like that, the way that looks, to be honest with you, but it covers up kind of a cool feature in that if you take a hairdryer and soften up the parts here, you can take the eyeball off, you can even take the whole head off, and you can either turn the head upside down and have it be kind of like this, be the head, so you have the tentacles at the top and then the eyes are here, or you can actually turn, just, you can do this without heating it up or anything. You can just turn it around and have a giant eyeball be in the front. So it's kind of interesting that you have those options, but I'm just going to be displaying it like that. But anyway, these are cool. I mean, they have a lot of volume to them, I guess you'd say. They're big, cool feeling, and look impressive on display, which, what more can you really ask for, right? Speaking of big and impressive things, the last thing I'm going to show you is something from actually a Chinese creator, and there are an increasing number of people in sort of China, Taiwan, that kind of area, that are creating very impressive soft vinyl figures. This is from Boda Studio, and it is a little bit hard to describe, honestly, but it's essentially a combination of Godzilla and a robot, although it looks more like Godzilla is wearing a robot costume in some sense, although you don't see his tail in the back, so it doesn't quite look like that. And also, if we look a little more closely at the details here, you can see he's got one set of arms on the top, and then he's got a larger set of arms on the bottom. So I don't know if this is meant to be kind of a medical experiment gone wrong or something, some kind of weird, I don't know, mad scientist situation here, but I thought it was really impressive, and I decided to get one. This is an unpainted version, as you may be able to tell, because, well, I mean, it was too expensive, in all honesty, to get the painted one, and I thought maybe I would like to try and paint it myself at some point, so I decided to get the plain vinyl version, but I think it's actually pretty impressive even in this state. It's very big. I don't know if you can quite tell. For a soft vinyl figure, very large, and very impressive. It's got a huge number of parts that it's made up of. The thing about these vinyl figures is they're made in molds, and you have to pour in basically liquid vinyl and then heat it up and pull it out, and you have to kind of make your designs be something that can be removed from a mold. And if you want something that's a very complicated design like this one, you can't just make it all one piece. You have to make individual pieces that are then assembled. And this one, I believe, has 21 pieces, which is just unheard of for a soft vinyl figure, generally speaking. He's got sort of the usual kind of articulation with the head, 2 sets of arms. The legs do not articulate, but he does turn here. They even used some transparent vinyl, I guess it is, for these lenses, which I thought was pretty neat. Yeah, there's all sorts of very impressive stuff going on with these vinyl toys, and I'm excited to see what people come up with. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at a few of the things that I picked up recently for my budding collection of soft vinyl figures. I've actually started a new Instagram account that's mostly devoted to soft vinyl figures and other non-Star Wars toys. So if you're interested in that, you can go to Instagram and follow me at MJC_toys. I'll put a link in the video description. I'll be posting, well, I posted pretty much all of the ones that I showed in this video already, but I'll be posting other ones that I get from time to time. And I'll also, in the video description, put links to the Instagram or websites of all of the creators that I've been talking about today. Well, that's about it for today. Thanks very much for watching and making it through to the end of the video. I'll be back with some more Star Wars or Jabba-related content very soon. This video, just like all my videos, was brought to you with the help of my Patreon supporters, including these Palace VIPs, Angelica Brady, and Jesper Murtu. Thank you very much for your support, everyone. If you'd like to know how you could become a patron and support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can click the link in the video description.